It's a blessing to welcome on one of the best players from the Chino Hills, one of the greatest teams in high school history, and now a 4-year career. A man has set himself all over the record books in LMU history. Eli Scott, how you doing, man?
Good on yourself.
Pretty good. Well, kind of take us through this. I know we were just discussing this a little bit, but it's been a COVID season. It's obviously great to get on the court, but at the same time, it's been hectic. It's been a crazy season. How does it feel just kind of sit back down and kind of relax right now?
Feels good. It's different, obviously, having all this free time on your hands. Feels good to be able to catch up on school. That's probably the most refreshing thing. Instead of having to email teachers every week, oh, I missed this assignment. Do you think I can have extra time? Now you're able to get in class, understand the materials, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And this has been different because you already had 3 years under your belt of it being normal college basketball, except for obviously all the stuff that happened last year on the very end. But what was it like adjusting to this as a player, going through all the constant testing, going through wearing masks a lot of time, obviously locker room stuff, like all the stuff you guys had to deal with? What was it like adjusting to this?
It was frustrating at times because it was obviously so different for us. Locker rooms are spread out. Sometimes teams don't necessarily have us in a locker room. They kind of just have us in an open room with chairs, It's not like a traditional locker room. So that was frustrating. Having to practice with masks, that can be bothersome sometimes. And obviously, you do try to wear it on your face as best you can, but there's just a point in time in practice you just pull it down to your chin because you can't breathe. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be worse, or we could just not be playing at all. So
Mm-hmm. And you guys were also in a tough situation. I talked to Coach Johnson before the season. He obviously talked about you guys weren't able to get to the gym right away. Obviously, California was the most strict and has been throughout the course of the year with protocols and all that. So there were teams that were getting back in campus maybe a few months before season. You guys only had so many weeks leading up to the year. How was that adjusting? Like, not obviously, you guys had a lot of freshmen on the team, young guys. How'd you adjust to not having that much practice time?
um, it was difficult because we were obviously outside. Um, a lot of guys that we had were actually coming back. Like Joe came off a torn ACL. Our big man had came off for personal reasons, and Damien had came off a broken ankle. So even though we didn't have a lot of freshmen, we still needed time to gel again and like figure out how they're playing, how each other's games have grown. So I feel like that was probably the most difficult part of it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into this past season in a little bit, but kind of go through your story because you've had a great one. It's been a lot of ups and downs, but a lot of just great stuff. So let's kind of get into this. You're from California. You've been able to stay home for your entire career now. Take us to that, just growing up out here, out California. What was that like?
I mean, it was great. Being able to play against top players, in my opinion, California has the best competition in terms of AAU teams and high school teams that you can play against. So the year-round competition was great. And just being in California, as a whole, was just something that I've always loved, and I couldn't imagine being anywhere else.
And we also want to get up to the high school level. And you start off originally at Upland High, and that's where your freshman season goes. Take us to that, though. Why is that the school you want to start off your career at?
Well, that was the area I lived in at the time. I grew up in Upland. My parents still live in Upland. Yeah, so that's why I went to Upland my freshman year.
And you go throughout the course of that year, I know, and ultimately then you end up moving out to Chino Hills, which is where you really create your name and all that. But you end up moving with the Ball family, and you kind of go through this whole process of obviously just transitioning through all high school at such a young age. How did you get accustomed to that and adjust to that so early on?
Well, for me, it was much different than the average person because some of my best friends were like the guys at the school, So it wasn't like I was going into a school where I had no friends. Like, or my friends happened to be at the top of the social totem pole, I guess you could say. So that was pretty easy. But not being able to play my sophomore year, that was difficult. That was probably the first time in my life I really dealt with adversity, and seeing games that I feel like I could help them with, but having to sit out. And I felt I was kind of played when they ruled that I couldn't play that year because of a athletically motivated transfer. When I feel like there's guys from private schools that do it all the time, there's guys in public school that do it all the time. So yeah.
Give me your thoughts a little bit more on that because that is something that we're seeing more and more of, which is why I think these prep schools are becoming such a big thing because the elite players that are guys that are going to high level Division 1, you guys obviously want to play with other top guys. You just want to push yourself. That may not be your freshman year. You want to wait till sophomore, so on. And we see some states, Arizona is one of those, California is one where they're strict. You could sit out half the year, entire year. What's your thoughts on that? And how much is that really affecting the game of basketball?
No, I think the rules should be gone, honestly. I think some of these kids aren't even going to be able to play after these 4 years, So why limit their time window? And for the kids that want to team up with other kids, why not? Like, why are we gatekeeping high school kids? It's not like anybody's getting paid for this. It's not like schools are getting paid for it. So why not let these kids play at the schools they want to?
And that is something that's cool, though. I mean, obviously, we know it's a Ball family, but just a family wants to accept you. And I know you kind of grew up with them, you knew them for a long time. So, kind of going back a little bit, though, how did you guys first meet? What was the first day you met the Ball family and kind of got to know them?
I mean, that was years ago. That was probably like sixth grade. We had a gym, and they needed a player, I think, and I was there. And then just from there, we just built a friendship. And then we had one by like 50, and they were like, "Come back next week, come back next week," all the way until I graduated high school.
Just like an AAU event, you guys just kind of called you up
Yeah,
the
it was
Doughnut
like
guys.
no, like that was before AU was really even a thing. It was just like a local like games at a high school,
Hmm.
and I just happened to be there.
So were you guys like in middle school time, elementary? Like how old were you guys?
Mello's in elementary school. Jello and I might have been in sixth grade going into seventh, and Lonzo might have been in eighth going into ninth, I think.
And so you guys ultimately obviously continue to build that bond, that relationship, and it comes to where you do decide to go to Chino. What was that? Was that were they kind of recruiting you over there, or was that just something you just kind of needed a better fit, or what kind of led to you ultimately making that transfer?
I mean, they just came at me and said, for your long term future, this will be what's best for you. And obviously, as guys I consider my family,
Hmm.
their opinion holds a lot of weight in my life. So when they said that and LeVar said that, I was like, okay, I was open to it, but I actually didn't even want to go my sophomore year. I actually wanted to wait a year because it was the day before up in high school I'd started my sophomore year. So I'm like, I can't just transfer one day before school starts. Ultimately, I ended up doing that.
And this wasn't quite a team where you look at it when you first go over there. It's not like it is today where you saw them and you guys weren't a 35-0 team yet. You guys weren't having all these pros. This was a team that was 17-15, a good team. You saw the potential there, but it wasn't the Chino Hills that you guys eventually become. How appealing was that to you? Like, what was this kind of the pitch that LeVar made to you, that the guys made to you? Like, what did you guys kind of expect you guys could accomplish when that did all decide to come through?
Well, IAU team was so good. Well, Lonzo and Jello had played with the upper division at the time, and then myself and Mello and Andre Ball, who's at Pepperdine, we all played on the same team. So we knew once Mello would be there the following year that all of us would be reunited again. So I think just playing with your friends, and the thing that we do in the AU, taking that to high school because nobody had ever done that. Most of the time when you see AU teams, it's a guy from here, a guy from there, a guy from there. But this was like a closely knit family type thing. So I think that was probably the biggest recruitment
As you
type thing.
say, you sit out there then the entire sophomore year, which to a degree, obviously, that's not what you want. You want to be out there playing, but I know you also kind of look at that for example too. I mean, you look at that and you say, okay, you can kind of look through a coaching lens. You can kind of develop yourself, work on your game more. How would you say you were able to benefit off of not playing that year?
I mean, it gave me a chance to get stronger. Like I went to Chino Hills at like 160 pounds, and then like my junior year, like I was like 210. So that gave me a chance to get bigger, stronger, faster, and just work out. It essentially was like a high school red shirt, I guess you could say. Yeah, so that's probably the ways it really helped me.
So you guys are heading into that junior season, and ultimately this team features. We know the three ball brothers. We know Andre. We know Cam Shelton, which is also killing out there at NAU right now. Yourself, Big O's out there. But did you really expect this team to go down as possibly the greatest team in high school history, undefeated, win the Open Division? Like, was that your expectations?
I think our expectation would go undefeated, but I don't think the way we did it and the magnitude of what we did, I didn't think like we didn't think like, well, LeVar thought this, but like as players, we didn't think like, oh, we're going to be the greatest team ever. Like we're just like, oh, we expect to win every game. We're going to go out there and try to win every game. But LeVar was the one saying like, this can be the greatest show anybody's ever seen. But like, you know how he is. He's very animated. So like saying the greatest show anybody's ever seen, and then he was just saying, like, not just in high school, but just all of basketball. This is something that people are going to talk about for years. Like, literally, everything that it is now was his vision back in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So,
This is something that's getting more and more national attention because we know he obviously was heavy in the media for so many years prior to Zoe and Mel and all these guys panning out now. But he also was calling all these guys. He said, obviously, all of them are going to play in the NBA. All of them are going to do all this. And people were laughing, made fun of him. People obviously weren't always big fans of him, criticizing him. Coming to today, we obviously know what they're all doing, which all you guys are doing now. But what was he like? Because you kind of got him from the father figure. You didn't just see him like a lot of people did from the social media aspect. You saw him on the day-to-day life. How was he what was it like kind of having him almost be a father figure to you?
I mean, it's just like any other father figure. He was a provider, who's somebody that you can look up to, somebody that did things the right way. I think just the confidence he carries himself with, that's something that every young man should take from their father figure. And yeah, it's it.
And you see the way all these guys have panned out, this entire team. What's just like seeing that? I mean, you got to go turn on the TV. You see Zoe, you see Melo, all of them doing their thing. You see Jello, the G League. You see, obviously, what we yourself doing. I said Cam's averaging 20, 22, I believe, out the NAU. What's just like watching all you guys play and pan out the way and kind of live out your guys' dreams?
It feels great, especially for guys like Olynyk and Cameron Shelton, who necessarily weren't even supposed to be in the position that they're in now. You know, like nobody expected Big O to be a top 6 pick back when he was just a young freshman growing into his body. Cameron Shelton, when he went to NAU, nobody thought that he'd be arguably the best player in the Big Sky. So I think I'm especially for those guys, I'm super happy for Melo, Jello, and Zoe. Those guys, I felt like it was written for them. Like I felt like if they did what they were supposed to, they were going to get there. You know, because they put in that type of work. They put in. And they honestly believe in themselves more than anything. Not like they're robots that just work out. Like they actually have their heart and soul into the game. So
We have heard stories about what LeVar and all you guys have done before working out in the mornings. Take us through his workout routine for you guys. Like, how did you push you guys? Like, what was your workouts with that family?
a lot of hill running. Like they're just huge hill that we'd run a mile on, and then we'd run sprints on this other hill. And then a lot of shooting on the machine, and a lot of like 2-on-2 in the backyard. And the backyard space was kind of confined. So like having to go around somebody and the help side being right there because the backyard space was so small. Obviously, in the time being, like we didn't think, like I didn't think that way because I was 16. But like going back now, having those situations, you know, or he'd even situational play. Like this team is up 5-2, and we're going to 7. So now you have to get stops and things of that nature to win the game. It's not just going back there and just playing ball and just throwing, you know what I mean? It's actual work towards in-game play. So,
and that's rare. There's very, very few siblings that can say that we can go out there and play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, and really all be at about the same level. We can all actually compete with each other. You see just a few of the triplet sons or kids or brothers, all that in the NBA before. You guys have all you guys be able to go out there, play 2-on-2, 3-on-3. What was that like?
It was great, honestly, especially because we all push each other in the weaknesses that we had. So let's say Lonzo's quote unquote weakness would be strength, you know? So then you have Jello who's insanely strong in that post up. So now Lonzo can work on his post defense. And then you have Melo who let's hypothetically say this, like this isn't a fact, but let's say he struggled against Lent. Now he has Lonzo who has long arms to play against, you know? So I feel like it's helping fill each other's voids in the backyard.
And also at the same time, as you said, they have a whole massive social media presence. They're really well known and famous. And that trickles down to you too now because you're playing at a high level. You're part of this team, contributing at a high level for Chino. And you start getting all this fame then around junior year. How did you accept that? Because some guys, obviously, it's fun, it's cool, but it can also bring a lot of other stuff along with it. How did you adjust to becoming such a high social media personality?
It really was an adjustment period because at the time being, Instagram isn't what it is now. You know, like it was like baller visions, like we didn't have like overtime and things like that to really like, you know what I mean? Like Instagram isn't what it is today. Like people like center their entire personality. They center sometimes they center their entire game after what's seen on Instagram. Like you have kids that see, let's say like a guy like T-Jazz, like now they want to do the dribble combos and things like that. Now, you know, so I feel like the adjustment period wasn't very hard because Instagram isn't what it is now. And it was just like a lot of followers that like your photos, you know, like that's back when Instagram like just had direct message and posting. Like there's no other thing on Instagram. So
also in day-to-day life, I mean, you're going to games that are sold out pretty much every time you step on that court and you have fans, you have people following you guys around. Was that an adjustment period for you at all?
No, because it's somewhat what LeVar warned us of. Like he warned us that we'd be the greatest show on earth and people would come far and wide. And obviously when you're told that, like it just doesn't sound realistic. Like people would come miles and miles to come watch a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds play basketball. Like, you know, like you have the Lakers, you have USC football, you know, because we live in California. So it's so much entertainment and things, but people are choosing to spend their Friday nights to see Chino Hills basketball. So.
And we have this debate. You guys are obviously clear in that discussion for the greatest team of all time. We know Montverde had an incredible team last year. There's always, as you look back at history, there's a lot of those teams, but you guys are firmly in that mix. Would you consider yourself the best high school team ever to play, though?
I mean, for me personally,
Mhm.
I feel like that's one of those things that we're always going to debate. You know, it's a subjective thing or objective, whatever word you use for that. It's an objective thing. I definitely think we're up there. I don't know if we can say we're the best because there's probably going to be another team that comes along and has a whole bunch of guys. And there's like obviously the Dunbar teams back in the day and the Crenshaw teams that were great. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. Especially with the Crenshaw teams, I feel like the reason some people may put them over is because they did it over a decade, whereas Chino Hills had a 2 to 3 year window where we did what we did. So I'm not sure. But if we're talking about in terms of productivity post
That's was. Mm-hmm.
post high school, then obviously I feel like we'd be in the top 2 or 3 conversation. But if we're talking about just high school, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to kind of see. Cause I know some people obviously view how the team was. If you just take that year's team at the peak of your guys' games, how would that peak compare against other guys? A lot of people do it. Some people kind of either completely base it off of it, or in my opinion, kind of look at it a little bit. Hey, let's pan out long term. And as we said, obviously 2, 3, 4, you guys could be in the NBA, if not more. Also, you have guys like them. Montberry's going to have a ton of those guys. Like you look at that. How would you guys compare kind of in terms of that when you guys all reach you guys peak when you're talking about obviously all the guys in the NBA from Chino, that Montverde team from last year? Like how do you guys compare up?
I mean, I think it may be even because you guys, Cade Cunningham, who I feel is the best player in the country right now, that would be the equivalent to what Lonzo was when he was in
Mm-hmm.
at UCLA. Then you have, I don't really know that Montverde team because obviously I was in college when they
Yeah.
were doing their thing, so I really didn't pay much attention to high school basketball. But I feel like there's, I can't remember the light skinned kid's name, but he may be like the mellow of that group, the
Mm-hmm.
guard, and then they have a really good big man there. I can't remember his name. Maybe like, oh, and then they're probably going to have a guy who was who's going to be a really good college player, and that would be the equivalent of myself. And then they're going to have another guy who's a really good college player. So all these guys can't go one and done. You know, I feel like that's the
Mm-hmm.
harsh reality of it. And I feel like the advice that I give to those guys who don't get discouraged because Cade and those guys are one and done, and your path's a little different. You know, everybody's path's not the same. So I feel like we may be even because I feel like they're going to go down a similar path.
You just nailed it right there. That's another discussion I want to touch up on because you obviously spent a 4-year career now, and we'll discuss it later. I mean, you have opportunity to come back, whatever you want to do on the road, but that's something that so many guys think of, especially when you're around a lot of the top guys. My friend's going one and done. My guy's going 2 years in the NBA. That's what I want to do. And sometimes we see guys force themselves out of it, and they might last, might be overseas real quick, which isn't wrong with that, but that's just kind of the mentality. What led you though? How were you always able to stay confident and say, you know what, I want to stay 4 years or possibly more now, but stay 4 years at least out of college and really just be able to grow and develop and get my degree? Like, what kind of led to that mindset?
Well, for me, I was blessed to have great people in my corner. So I understood that they were telling me that I'm running my own race, you know. So just because those guys are doing that, you don't have to go necessarily that path, and you can. There are lots of guys, especially not just 4-year guys, but mid-major guys. If you have Dame, you have
Mm-hmm.
CJ. I mean, depending what you consider San Diego State, Kawhi, like just the path that you go to the NBA is not going to be the same for everybody. Even PJ Tucker, he was essentially the best player in the Big 12, and he's a role player his entire career. So, to just like paths and different things like that, I was blessed to have great people in my corner to let me know and constantly remind me that, like, it's okay to be a 22-year-old rookie. You don't have to be a 19-year-old phenom to still be productive in the NBA. So,
You mentioned a couple of names out there. I know you've also said before on the LMU bio that Draymond's kind of your one-on-one kind of guy you kind of would love to dream to play against. And you guys do have a lot of similarities in your game. Kind of the smaller guys that could run guard, forward, just does everything on the court. You mentioned another guy, PJ Tucker, just kind of just the utility tool. He just can do everything on the court. Who are some of those guys that you kind of model your game after and kind of watch to learn, take pieces from?
just Draymond, realistically, I was blessed to have seen Draymond in his prime growing up. So I felt like, especially with people that are in my corner, like I said, they said, like, you do some out of your game after Draymond, because let's be honest, I'm not going to get much taller if I even get taller. I'm not the most athletic guy, but this is the guy that maximized his tools that he was given by God, and same thing with PJ Tucker. He's a guy who maximized his tools. So definitely Draymond Green. And if a team needs me to be a PJ Tucker type player, then I'd have to just work on my jump shot and continue to develop on defense.
Without doubt. We're from with the high school thing before getting your college career, one of which is another hard part is for some guys saying, well, you are a guy that could obviously go out there and probably win California Player of the Year, or go put up insane numbers, especially if you can stay back where you're from home. But you just had to go at an opportunity where you're not going to be the superstar right off the back. You're going to go and kind of just play a role to a degree. What led to that? Like, why was that something you wanted to be okay with?
I just think being patient and once again having great people in your corner, especially right now in basketball, it's at bad advice at an all-time high. If you look at the transfer portal, it's at an all-time high because guys don't want to wait their turn, or guys don't want to be a part of something unless they're the one getting all the notoriety. So I just feel like the people in my corner letting me know that it's okay to be a part of something. Because being a part of something, it's just like anything in life. When it takes a village to do anything, like nobody's going to single-handedly get to where they are today. And same thing when it comes to winning in sports. Like no team, like even Oklahoma State, they still have guys that can play. Like let's not act like Cade Cunningham surrounded by scrubs. Like these guys can still play. So, yeah.
And that is something that I know a lot of guys kind of value. Like, what do they want for high school career? And whatever, really, any route that guys take could be different situations. But if you're a guy in your shoes, if there's a guy out there that's a top player or someone that's going to be going Division I, would you say is the best route for them to go play at a prep school, go play at a situation where you're with a lot of the talent, competing against the top talent? Like, is that the best route for a guy?
I think it depends on your game, honestly. So if you're a scorer, maybe you'd want to be the man, But if you're a guy like myself who's a utility guy, what better for a utility guy than to be around other great tools, So I definitely feel like, and just kids understanding that it's okay not to be the guy that scores 30 points. Like everybody can't score 30 points, just like everybody can't be the president. We have to have some mayors and some senators. Everybody can't be the president, So that's probably my advice.
You head up with that phenomenal season. You end up going your senior year. Then it's still a great team. Obviously, you have a special, but not quite the 35-0 team that year. But that year is really where you get your own opportunity. You average nearly 20 points a game, 15 rebounds per game, 5 assists. You really become a star that year. What was that year like?
It was definitely different because now you're stepping out of Lonzo's shadows. You don't have arguably the best player in California history on your team, so now you have to mature. I think one of the biggest things that people don't talk about in terms of Chino Hills is the maturity factor that all of us have went through. Like even Lonzo before we got there, like the player he was before we got there, and then the leader we had, the 35-0 team, it's two totally different people. And then you have Olynyk, who obviously after Melo had left, he matured into the player he is today. So just the maturity factor.
I want to kind of touch up on a couple of different guys because those guys are all pros and you guys all have different mentalities. We know guys that pan out in the NBA or even college like yourself have a special mentality that not all guys do. So starting with Lonzo, like what was different about him? You just talked to him in practice, you just talked to him just getting to know him, but what's his mentality? Why was he able to pan out and now become really a franchise point guard in the NBA?
He was able to pan out, and his mentality is different because he's a guy who's never too high, never too low, He's a natural born leader. Like when he walks into a room, you naturally just turn and look to see what he has to say, So I think his demeanor is probably the biggest thing that set him apart.
And you're with your Olynyk when he was obviously younger and he panned out to what he is today. But what was that as a younger guy when you're kind of mentoring him to a degree? What was he like, and what kind of was the spark you saw? And did you see him even becoming the number 6 pick in the draft and a potential franchise center for the Hawks?
I mean, for me, I did personally because I was one of the 14 people that got to see the work live, and I just think him being a sponge, that's what he is. Like when it comes to reps or like coaching, like he's a sponge. Like he's not a guy that ever talks back. He's not a guy that, like, even if he disagrees with you, he'll never show it on his face. He'll talk to you after practice. So I think the maturity that he showed at a young age and his ability to learn, I think the ability to learn is probably the biggest thing for your long-term growth as a basketball player.
And then Melo, we know he's not quite as exactly like Zoe. He's more fun personality type, but what was he like? Just what's his personality like, and what allowed him to become an NBA player?
I think his energy and his passion for the game, because there's a lot of kids, especially obviously nobody's went the route that Melo's went, but there's so many guys that are just giving so much at a young age where they kind of lose sight of their end goal, or they feel as if they don't have to listen to anybody, So I think Melo's ability to adjust to the fame and yeah.
And you saw that firsthand because that is a hard thing. We've seen so many stories of guys that LeBron's really one of the only guys we could say so far has made it through an entire career where he hasn't been disrupted. He's been since 15 years old. Before there even was any form of social media, he was famous and world known. He's more than surpassed everyone's expectations. But it's hard. We see so many stories. Like we heard Stephon Marbury's story in his documentary. We've seen guys that high ranked, high famous, and go down the wrong path eventually. What allowed him to prevail? And ultimately become a guy where he is legitimately sitting as the face of Charlotte's future?
I think his determination as a player. I think even now, as his friend, I still see the same 14-year-old that wants to be great, like
Mhm.
a guy who's got millions of dollars and has everything he wants at his disposal, and he still have that same hunger that he had. And he never loses the sight of why he started playing basketball. He started playing basketball because it was fun, Even when you watch him play in the NBA now, he looks like he's having fun out there. Like there's so many guys you see in the NBA, but the game doesn't look fun. It looks like they're just out there because they get paid. So I
Mhm.
feel like him never losing sight of the game or still being genuine with the game of basketball. I think that's what really pushed him.
Absolutely. Well, then we get into your recruiting process, and you're a guy that, for whatever reason, we know rankings are rankings, and you're not ranked too high, 429. And you have a few offers that you're really considering. I know finally came down to UC Riverside in the mix, UC Irvine, Utah State, and you choose LMU. Take us to that process, though. Why is LMU the school you chose?
Obviously, like I said when we first started, I definitely want to stay in California. Coach Dunlap had coached in the NBA prior to getting the LMU job, and I just like the location and the resources that I was able to have at LMU. LMU is one of those schools where there's lots of celebrity kids that go there. So the people that I've met at LMU, and just that's the resource aspect of LMU long term, because that's my entire thing as a person and a basketball player. My long-term success, my long-term future, just taking that into consideration with any decision I make in life.
And that's a huge thing that not all guys look at as the other things besides basketball. Obviously, probably your main thing was still basketball. How's it going to pan out, focus, and all that. But you still have to look at the education factor, what your education you're looking at. As you said, resources long term. How is this the LMU thing? As you've now gone through 4 years, you graduate and all that, or soon to graduate. What's it just been like, just learning? What's some of the biggest things you've taken away off the court from the school?
Well, one of the things I've really taken off the court was the humility aspect. There's so many kids that come from like these $1 million families, but they're still such humble people, and they're willing to learn and still talk to you. Like these kids that drive Bentleys that will still get out and ask you how you're doing today. Like just things that you don't see every day. So I definitely think the humility factor, and even the faculty like with Coach Dunlap and Coach Johnson now, those two guys treat the janitors the same way they treat our associate head coach. Like there's just a respect factor that everybody has for each other, and how everybody puts their helping hand out, like the academic advisor. Like if you have a paper due at 12 o'clock, they will answer at 11:50 about how to print the paper out. So I just think that whole aspect of LMU is something that I can take away.
I mentioned also the ranking aspect. I know I'm not a big fan of rankings. We know that's is what it is, but you're a guy that your accolades speak for themselves. You had all these awards in California in the Open Division, state champion, all this stuff, and you still weren't ranked that high. You weren't highly recruited. What kind of were your thoughts with that? How did you handle kind of being still an underrated player?
Just like anything else, you use it as motivation, but it's not something that you should soak in, and I think all players should do that. Because, like I said, you guys don't. Damian Lillard went to Weber State. Like CJ Cullen went to Lehigh. Like these are guys who are $100 million NBA players that went mid-major. So I definitely think you shouldn't soak on it. And I think you should go to a school that best fits you, and LMU best fit me. And there's so many times where people thought I was going to transfer out of LMU after having a decent season. But if I were to do that, would I still be the same player I am today? I'm not sure, because now I'm splitting minutes instead of getting the spotlight that I have at LMU. So
at the same time, you're in the West Coast Conference, which some people might not say it's too hot, too gray. I know a lot of people always say Gonzaga is not as good because of that, but truly for people that know basketball, we see how special it is out there. We see how you see Pepperdine. We see you guys. We see obviously BYU is a great team too. What's it just been like, and how special truly is the West Coast Conference?
I mean, West Coast Conference to me is probably the best conference on the West Coast, and that's including the Pac-12. Because if you look at Gonzaga, what they do in the out of conference schedule, they're beating the North Carolinas, they're beating the Dukes of the world. They're like, they beat Duke with Zion on there. San Francisco, who came in the middle of the pack in the WCC this year, they had beat Virginia on the road. So I definitely feel like people go a lot based off names rather than actually watching the games. If you watch some of the games of the WCC teams, they're great teams. There's great players like Bouye, he's a great player. Kessler Edwards is a guy that I personally think is going to be an NBA player for a very long time. So I definitely think that it's an underrated league, and I think that a lot of people should watch the games rather than looking at school names.
How do you feel like I said, those that truly know basketball, we watch, and obviously, like I said, there's tons of pros in that conference. And aside from even just Gonzaga, we know what Gonzaga is, but overall the entire conference. But when you hear all these things that people say about Gonzaga just playing easy schedule or whatnot, what kind of goes through your mind and you're also your teammates in the minds?
Honestly, after playing Gonzaga for 4 years, I personally feel if they were to go to the Pac-12, they do the exact same thing. If anything, they would probably do them worse because they would get up for every game, you know? So I personally don't think your conference matters because it's just like being recruited. If you're good, they're going to see you. Just like Gonzaga, if you're good, they're team like you're not the number one team in the country on accident, especially with the run that they've had for the past 6-7 years. You don't do it by accident. They have multiple NBA players on their team, and even if you look at BYU the last few years, Yoli Childs, he's one of the best players in the country. You have Jake Toolson, he plays for the Utah Jazz now. It's just Malik Fitz and Jordan Ford. These guys are both played for the Clippers a little bit, and now they're on G League team their first year out. So you're talking about 8, 9, 10 pros in the last few years that the WCC has had. So it's a bonus. He's an NBA All-Star. He was at Kelly Olynyk. He was in the NBA for a long time.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of jumping a little bit ahead, but we know this Gonzaga team is number one and the favorites to probably win this championship this year and possibly be the second team ever to go undefeated. But you've got 4 different teams, and all 4 were pretty special. All 4 teams have always been great. But how much more special is this Gonzaga team than all the other ones, or is this even the best one you've played so far?
I mean, for me personally, no shade to this current team. But the last few teams, like the team with Rui Hachimura, Brandon Clark, Killian Tilly, I thought those teams were like, in terms of size, athleticism, speed, Zach Norvell's on that team. So we're talking about 4 NBA players. I personally thought that was one of the better teams. But this year's team is insane also. So I personally feel like those past teams were a whole other level when it comes to physicality. But when it comes to scoring, I feel like this team beats those teams because this team will outscore you, but the other Gonzaga teams may outscore you, but they do defend their tails off also. But
no doubt. Well, let's get into this career. You go out there as a freshman, and you're not originally coming off as a starter the whole time. You end up starting more towards the end of the season, and that's where you really start creating a role for yourself. But overall, come out, you're on the all-conference team for the freshmen. Just take us to that freshman year. That was like getting adjusted to the college lifestyle.
It was difficult for me, especially not being around your parents anymore. You know. I have played with a guy named James Bateman, who's a great player. And once again, like thinking that I almost fell into the trap of I wanted to be the man type thing, you know, because like I'm finally away from the Ball family, like I'm my own guy now. And a guy like James Bateman, who's a great player, was the guy here. So it was definitely an adjustment period, but it was definitely for the best. I don't think I would be the player I am now if I didn't go through those moments.
Mm-hmm. And when you finally start really kind of having it all clicking, you start starting for the team to end the season. When would you though say, like, when was the point in your college career, if it even was your freshman year or later on, like when was the point you started feeling comfortable and felt like, okay, I know my role now, I know I can be this good, I know I can be an all-conference kind of player. Like when would you start saying that clicked for you?
I think the summer of my sophomore year, that's when I thought like, because that's when I was putting in the most work I've ever put in. Like that's when I really thought like, okay, I'm about to take off. And obviously I got mono that year and that was a major setback. But my sophomore year, just the work that I put in going forward, I felt like, okay, like I feel like I can be one of the top players in this conference.
And you ultimately look back at that. You come on campus for your freshman season, and now you walk away or possibly walk away right now as a senior 4 years down. You see all these things. Your name's high up in the record book for practically every single stat category right now. Would you have seen yourself possibly go down as maybe the greatest LMU player of all time?
No, I definitely feel like I'm up there, but I definitely think that Hank is just on a whole other level. I feel like I was actually telling Coach Johnson this today because when we were talking about legacies and things like that, if I would come back, boom, boom, boom. And then I said, like, it would be the equivalent of the Bulls. Like, no matter what you do, just from the outside looking in, nobody's ever going to pass Mike, you know? Like, nobody's ever going to pass Hank at LMU, you know? But I feel like Hank shouldn't be the bar that you set for yourself. I feel like just cement a legacy in itself at an institution like LMU should be your goal. So I think I'm definitely probably one of the top players, but I feel like Hank's just on a whole nother level. He's immortal to me in the LMU Raptors.
Would you say you surpassed yourself, your expectations for what you expected for your career, or do you think you could have done more? Could you have done less? Like, what were your expectations as a freshman coming in?
I think I've reached every goal that I set for myself, but I definitely think I overachieved in terms of what people anticipated me doing at LMU.
Yeah. So as you said, then that sophomore comes in. We know a lot of expectations were on you. Everyone thought you could have a really breakout year. And as you said, mono comes in, you step back. I think you missed 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that games to start the year. Obviously, it wasn't quite the full year you probably wanted to have, but how did you get adjusted to that? Like, what was like coming back that year and just kind of take us to your sophomore season?
My sophomore year, to be honest, I probably should have redshirted, but looking back on it, nothing you can do now. I never really got my feet really wet until the end of the season. And I think that year, for me, is probably the best year that I could have ever had, because people say the bottom teach you a lot more than the top ever will. And I think I really found a lot about myself going through that, especially seeing people that you thought were there for you once you're no longer playing well. Like, I don't know, I have like 7 points that year. Like, those same people are no longer around. So I definitely think that year for my development was probably the best thing to happen to me, because I feel like it taught me so much about the game of basketball, life, just everything as a whole.
Any person that has any kind of status in life, especially athletes, know that there's going to be people that rock with you, and then you see that they're not going to rock with you, and then they might even come back when stuff starts going good again. How have you learned to handle that and like let go of those type of people, and like kind of just take us through how you kind of worked on your circle and kind of kept it tight?
I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. I think the man upstairs puts people in your life, and he removes people in your life for certain reasons. So I think that's probably my go-to is just spirituality and understanding that whatever's meant for me and whoever's meant for me in life, God's going to put in my life, or he's going to remove.
Then you come off this season, and ultimately it's going to be a final year, which goes Dunlap. We'll talk about that in a second. But that junior year really is some year that you break out, you become a star, and you do a whole lot of great stuff for to touch up on. But what was that work like? What kind of led to that breakout season?
I just think maturing as a person, and telling myself that the way you felt your sophomore year, you're literally never going to feel that way again, because you have no time to feel sorry for yourself. I felt like as a sophomore, I felt sorry for myself, and it was nobody's fault. Like nobody, like you know what I mean? Like mine was not something that anybody controlled. So I felt like I almost started to feel bad for myself. So I felt like as a junior, like that was my motivation, was to bounce back and prove those who somewhat walked out on me wrong.
So you have 15.5 points per game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal per game, and a few other big time moments, one of which I want to touch up on. Your first triple double, which is also the first one in LMU history. You have 21, 13, 13 against Grambling. Take us to that night.
It was a special night. The morning I remember got up, had my usual donuts. I don't know. I just felt something in the air that day. The sky was clear as day. And I don't know. I just felt like when we were warming up that I just felt like it was gonna be a great night. Same thing with Colorado. Some of my best games, I just felt in the warm-up line that it was just one of those type of nights for me.
So is your morning typically your routine to get donuts then?
Yeah, get donuts. Coach Johnson not a huge fan of that ritual, but yeah, get donuts in the morning. Come back, listen to some music, and then go to the gym. Get a lift in, and then go to the gym.
Where are you getting your donuts from? What type are they?
My junior year, I was a huge Krispy Kreme guy. Like it was almost an addiction. And then now I just go to the Yum Yum that's right outside my apartment. It's like maybe like a block or two away.
Coach Dunlap had a couple more years to kind of experience that for you, but did he get used to it at any point? And did Coach Johnson ever accept it?
I really didn't do it that much my first 2 years, but my last year, I don't even think Coach Dunlap knew about my Krispy Kreme addiction. But one of our assistants, Coach Hall, he knew about our because he would like call me like, "Well, what are you up to?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm at Krispy Kreme right now." And then Coach Johnson, I had mentioned it one time, and he like gave me like this dirty look, like because he just hates anything like any type of fatty food. Like he's like anti-soda. Like he's like because Coach Johnson like a super fit coach. Like there's times I'll go in the weight room on the road and he's like up at 8 a.m. like pumping iron. So I just think and it gives him so much credibility because if he was some big guy that was saying like, "Oh, I need to eat better," then it's like, "Yeah, shut up because you're not even eating better." This guy I've seen put in so much work on his body. Like he has a home gym that he gets up at 5 a.m. and works out every morning. So.
It's that year, as you said, you have the triple double, the first one in LMU history. Then you said the Colorado game, 31 points, 10 rebounds, and you guys beat obviously number 20 ranked Colorado. Take us that night is what it was like going out there and putting that performance up against Colorado.
It was just one of those nights because the night before we had 2 nights before we had lost on a half court shot. So it left such a sour taste in my mouth. And it was, I think, maybe the first time in my life I've ever lost on a buzzer. No, it's not. My freshman year I did too. So it was the second time in my life I had ever lost on a buzzer beater. So it was just a nasty taste in my mouth. And I knew that against Colorado, who's a great team, if we wanted to even have a chance to win, I would have to have a big-time performance. And that's what I went out there and did.
Another special game for you was against Portland, and it's also the first time in program history. Once again, they did it a double-double without scoring 10-plus points. You had obviously double-double with rebounds and assists. Take us to that night and really what led to that performance.
I mean, Coach Porter, it's a great coach, and every time we play them, they limit me because they throw so many different defenses at me. That's a guy who coached in the NBA, so he's coached against 1,000 times better, or he played against 1,000 times better players than I've ever been. So I think just him trying to take away my scoring and my teammates hitting open shots really led to that type of night.
Now we head into your senior year, which is we kind of discussed a little bit earlier, but you end up having by far your best year. You make the all-conference team, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Obviously, an incredible season. Just what was your thoughts in the senior year?
It was something I set out to do, and it's something that I wouldn't be able to do without Coach Johnson. He's pushed me harder than anybody's ever pushed me in my entire life. And this year was everything Coach Johnson I talked about when he first got the job. And I think his credibility is through the roof because of that. He's a guy who, in front of the media, is going to hype me up harder than anybody, and this guy behind closed doors who's going to be tougher than me, tougher on me than anybody. So I think this is just something product of what Coach Johnson's helped me with.
I guess the difference is because you obviously had Coach Dunlap for the majority of your career. You had 3 years with him. What was he like in this? How close were you guys?
Me and Coach Dunlap, we still talk every single day. I feel like Coach Johnson and Coach Dunlap are different in terms of Coach Dunlap's age and him being more of a fatherly type role, where Coach Johnson's more of a big brother type role because he's obviously a younger coach. He's a super energetic guy. So I think that's probably the biggest difference. And I'm like this with both of them. And I definitely feel like both are needed in your life. You definitely need a guy who's super energetic, but you also need a guy who's monotone and tells you the real all the time. Coach Johnson tells me the real all the time. I feel like Coach Dunlap, just the way he goes about things is much different. And I appreciate them both in their own respective ways.
You mentioned the transfer portal earlier, and guys, if there's any kind of conflict, a coach leaves or they don't start, they're not a superstar, whatever, they want to transfer out. That's why the records are probably going to be hitting way over 1,000 this year soon. But you decided to stay at LMU. You decided to go through and stick through the coaching change. How did Coach Johnson sell you, and was that even a factor? Like, did you ever even consider possibly leaving LMU?
I didn't really consider it because obviously, like I said, once again, I love California. But I feel like Coach Johnson, when he first called me, everything he ever said to me was genuine. He made promises that he kept this entire year. Even when me and him disagree with something, we always go back to that first conversation we had and about how there's going to be times where we disagree. And as long as it's a respectful disagreement, there's nothing wrong with it. And so I think Coach Johnson, just his genuineness is what really sold me. When he got the job, one of the first things he did was call my parents. Like, who does that? Like he could have just called me and been like, "Oh, what's up? Like, you're my best player. What's good?" But he took time to call all of our parents, not just my parents, but he called all of us and he called all of our parents. And he flew from Milwaukee during the peak of Corona to meet us face to face like 2 days later. So I definitely feel like the genuineness behind Coach Johnson is what sold me.
And he's a coach that, as I said, he comes in, he doesn't get as much practice time. You guys have a freshman point guard in Jalin, I want to talk about in a second. And you guys also going to go 13-9, and you're obviously a great team, but you're the senior guy. You're a leader, you're all this stuff, and you have to get adjusted now. You have to learn a new play style. You need to learn all this. How did you guys kind of connect on the court so quickly to where you guys had your breakout season? You guys had a great season overall as a team. How did this all happen without really anything going on?
I think it's just the trust in the coaching staff and trust in each other. I felt like this year there was a different type of respect for each player. I feel like when you look to the side of you, you felt like this guy can make a play just as well as you could. Like last year, obviously with the guys being hurt, no offense to the guys I played with last year, but just the talent level around me is just like, Damon can go get a basket. Joe's one of the best shooters in the conference. Jalen Anderson, who got better with every single game. I felt like just when we looked at each other, we felt like each person, you had so much confidence in the person next to you.
And you guys are kind of talking to me about Coach. I mean, you probably discussed Coach Johnson a little bit, his energy and all, but what's the funniest moment, your favorite memory with him, whether it be with a team and you guys, just you and him personally? Like, what's your favorite memory alongside him this past year?
My favorite memory with Coach Johnson, I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Oh, probably when one time we were in the weight room, it was just me and him on the road after we beat San Francisco. And then he was like lifting weights and he was like, just pray you look this good at 41. That's why, I don't know why. Like, just the confidence, like I mentioned, just the confidence he has. Like it's definitely unmatched. Like he thinks he's the coolest 41-year-old on earth, which he probably is. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite moments with Coach Johnson.
He's a coach that I'm super high on. Like I said, to accomplish everything you guys did this first year and just his first year with the pandemic, everything going on is exceptional. But what heights can you take LMU to? We know we talk about Gonzaga's out there, BYU is great, but how great can he make LMU down the road?
I feel like Coach Johnson can make LMU a perennial program that's at the top of the WCC because of his ambition. Like when you see Coach Johnson and you talk to him on a day-to-day life, any accolade he gets, he doesn't care about because he's just so ambitious on the next project. Like he's like, well, I got nominated for Coach of the Year, but you know why I didn't win it? Because I didn't do this. And, like he's just a guy that's always finding something to get better on. So I definitely feel like with that type of ambition and success that Coach Johnson had over his coaching career, I feel like he can take LMU to a perennial top 3 program in WCC.
His track record has been great. Not necessarily as a head coach, he hasn't been that yet, but he was an assistant coach and he had a great, obviously, he found one of the greatest college point guards of all time, Marcus Howard from Arizona. He also developed him into who we know he is. But he did the same thing with someone I'm super high, especially long term with Jalin this past year from Arizona, finds him, gets him to come back over to LMU. How special is Jalin, though? Kind of discussed your as Bond, but also, like, what can he do in his LMU career?
I think Jalin could probably be behind Terrell Lowry and Anthony Ireland. That's probably third or fourth best point guard to have come through LMU, especially because he's another guy that's similar to O, who's a sponge. Him and Coach Johnson are like this, and even him and I are like this. And he's a guy that's fearless. He's not scared to take a big shot. He's not scared to get in your face. Like even though he'll listen to coaching, not coaching from myself. Like I'm like Jalin, like come on, dude. Like if I'm slacking, he's like, come on, dude. You know what I mean? So I just feel like Jalin Anderson, because he's so fearless and his willingness to listen and get better, it's going to be probably the top 5 point guard to come to LMU.
And we discussed all these mid-major point guards that make it to the next level. And he displayed that early on. I think it was game 2 or 3, something like that. That hits the game-winning shot, and he has
Game one. It was game one. It was game one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he comes out like that's not something that a lot of freshmen are going to do. He's maybe going to pass around. Most coaches won't even give a point guard that opportunity that early on. But what do you think he can achieve? Like, how far can LMU go with him as a point guard? Like sophomore, junior, senior year, even if it's a 5th year. Like, what's all things you think Jalin will accomplish in his career?
I think Jalin will definitely be top 5 in assists. I think he'll be 1,000-point scorer. I think he'll probably be the best. I feel like he can be what Kobe Ross was at Pepperdine. I feel like he can be a guy that puts an entire program on his back because of his willingness to listen, like I said, and just his fearlessness. He's not scared to take the big shot. And even versus BYU, he was literally fearless. Like he was going against a seasoned point guard, and he didn't back down to him at all.
Mm.
And he played against Marcus Carr, who was arguably one of the best guards in the country this year. Played him one of his first 5 games twice of his career. And he got a game winner in his face, but he came back the very next game and went hard again. So I feel like his fearlessness is just going to take him and LMU to new levels.
Now, there was one game I want to touch up on for this past year for yourself. 31 points versus Santa Clara. And you hit the game-winning shot that night. How special was that night for you?
It was a very special night for me because I felt like it was one of those nights where a guy in Josip Brankic, who they often compare me to, I felt like it was one of those nights where I felt like I had to separate myself, especially because the previous game, he had outplayed me. He had like 24 points, like 13 rebounds, and he was the best player in the gym. So I felt like I had to get back and show people why I felt like I was the best player in the gym. So.
Now, as I said earlier, you have the opportunity to possibly come back another year. You also, I can imagine, will have the opportunity to play pro, rather it be the G League, NBA, overseas, whatever it might look like. But how are you going to go approach this decision? Obviously, you haven't made it yet, but like, what's kind of your options? Like, what's the pros and cons? Like, just kind of take us through how you're adjusting and handling this option for you.
Just talking to Coach Johnson, that's probably how I've weighing pros and cons of like obviously coming back and another year of development, another year where what you do is not necessarily used against you. Whereas in a pro, as a pro, you're essentially skating on thin ice. You know how quickly people go. Not only in the NBA, but even overseas. It's just like, well, so you're not what we thought you were. We don't need you. Like we'll find somebody that does fit that role. So I think just those pros and cons and talking to Coach Johnson is how I'm going about it right now.
Let's say your ultimate decision is to come back and you guys build on this 13-9 record that could have been more if he doesn't have the pause and all you guys had mid-season. What can you guys accomplish? You see Jalin come to a sophomore year. Everyone comes back. You guys add in the recruiting class, possible transfers, whatever that looks like. You're a 5th-year senior. What can this LMU team do next year?
A tournament appearance, whatever seat that may be, I feel like LMU can do that. So that would be our goal if I were to come back.
Absolutely, man. Well, a few more things before I let you go. One of which is discussing the Drew League. Obviously, we know it's one of the biggest things you could do for basketball in the offseason. You were part of that a couple different times, so just take us through what the Drew League was like.
I mean, playing with Melo, O, and so many other great players, Marvell, I felt like it was a chance for me to get better. It was a chance for me to size myself up with other great players, especially going against other great players. Like you have guys like Pierre Jackson, who's making a $1 overseas. You have guys like Montrezl Harrell who play in the NBA. So I think in the summertime, just being able to play great competition and play in front of people, you see getting that street ball feel, but it's also like
Yep.
the atmosphere, like a real game atmosphere. So
Who was the toughest guy you've had to go up against, rather be in the Drew League, rather be in college? Like, who was that guy that you say you enjoy going up against the most?
well, the toughest would probably be because KD had came to play pickup one time at LMU. That was probably the toughest. I don't know. I feel like there's so many different guys. There's honestly some overseas guys who are tougher covers than NBA guys that I've played against. Like Malcolm Thomas, who played at San Diego State maybe 2 years ago. He's a tough cover. Like Pierre Jackson, he's ultra fast, but he still has grown man strength. He can shoot the lights out the ball. So for Corey Kispert, if he has an inch of space, like count it. So
I know there are some locations that NBA players hang out during the offseason. They go get some open runs at. I know a couple different colleges are all that, but you said Kevin Durant that came in. Is that a typical thing? Was that just a one-day thing they just walked in, you were shocked at? Like, how'd that all go down?
Oh no, like obviously because of USC's location, they can't necessarily always go there, and UCLA's so commercial. So so a lot of times they come through LMU and they get like CP3, Lillard, Rose, KD, Harden. Like Harden works out there every day in the summer, prior to COVID, obviously. So just NBA guys you see every day. Like you'll pull up to practice or like you pull up to the cafeteria. It's just like Ferrari outside because Kevin Durant's sitting in the gym. So pick up at LMU with NBA players is definitely a thing. I can't remember the trainer's name. It might be Chris Johnson. He usually uses our gym, so that's why there's so many NBA guys that are in there.
There are a couple of nicknames I want to touch up on. One of them is you are called the bully. How'd that first start? Take us through that nickname.
The bully, I just got from my play style, just backing people down, not settling for jumpers. So I think Lonzo he came up with that because he used to throw me the ball and say bully him. And I just like back him in for a layup. So then that was just that.
And a couple of things you have put in your bio, one of which is still no big homie. Take us through what that means too.
Still no big homie. That's just like I look up to nobody. Like I'm my own person. That's pretty much it. Just still no big homie.
Absolutely, man. Well, one thing I was like wrapping up discussing is your legacy, because ultimately everyone wants to create that legacy, what they're remembered for after they step away from the game of basketball. So when that day does come, you walk away from this game, what do you ultimately want to be remembered for what you achieve both on and off the court?
I think helping people through the game of basketball is what I want to achieve as a legacy. I feel like there's so many kids who are teetering on a thin line, and if they have that mentor or that guide, can maybe go this way instead of going that way. So I think giving back and definitely helping people through the game of basketball is what I would like my legacy to be.
We also touched up a little bit on faith, but I kind of want to go deeper on that to wrap this up now. So kind of let's talk about God. Like, how has he helped get you to the point you're at today? And just kind of talk about your relationship and your faith.
I mean, for me personally, I'm not a huge guy on physically going to church, but I think prayer and just all around belief is something that I pride myself on. And everything I've ever asked him to come through for, he comes through for me with, especially when it comes to timing. Like, it may not always be when I necessarily want it, but when I need it, he's there for me 10 times out of 10. So I could never thank him enough for getting me to where I am today.
I know Coach Johnson's a believer too. Have you guys been able to connect on that level at all?
Huh? Yeah, actually, like one of the first conversations we had, like he like had sat me down and he didn't know I was like a spiritual person. Me and him just talked about spirituality like 2 days ago also. But he like sat me down and like started reading me Bible scriptures, and I'm just like,
yep.
It's like my first time ever meeting him. I'm like, but Coach Johnson's a huge spirituality guy, and he's a guy that we pray before every game, we pray after every game as a team. We say the Lord's Prayer before the game. So I think Coach Johnson, spirituality is infectious on the team.
That's awesome, man. Well, my final thing for you, if you do come back, whatever your next goal is, like, what do you want the next year for yourself? Like, if we're seeing 1 year from now, if we talk again, Like, what do you want to be able to achieve and accomplish within the next year?
Definitely getting my team to the NCAA tournament, but also people saying that guy got better, especially when you had a bit of success like I have. I don't want to look back and people say like, he came back for a few just to do it. Like I want there to be a clear, evident change in not only my game, but how I carry myself, my body, all aspects of basketball.
Absolutely, man. Well, I'm definitely excited to see what God got next for you, man. I appreciate you taking time to come on today, and good luck from here on out, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course, always welcome on, man. God bless.
God bless.